The girl with the high ponytail sat scuffing her shoes on the legs of the plastic chair outside the head's office, a familiar conversation banging around her brain. "It's not my fault. It was a complete accident. Why do these things always happen to me? I couldn't help it if Form 5's pottery pig collection just happened to be out on the shelf where I put my stuff. It's not fair." She knew excuses or moaning would do nothing to help her already precarious position with the powers that be. So she tried to prepare a proper apology in her head and ready herself for whatever rubbish punishment would be handed out. At least she'd had plenty of practice at fixing her face into a look of sincere contrition. And it really hadn't been her fault this time. In fact, her experiment had been encouraged by her science teacher, who she reckoned was the only adult in the school, maybe the only adult she'd ever met apart from her nan, who seemed to get her. Her teacher understood what made her tick, and why she'd want to be experimenting with chemicals in the first place. The teacher had only joined the school a few months back. The ancient, crabby chemistry teacher, who had been there for as long as anyone could remember, and who spent lessons behind his copy of New Scientist, which was surely a joke, there was nothing new about him, had disappeared quite suddenly, no questions asked. And the teacher who replaced him was entirely different. Youngish, full of energy, asked brilliant questions which didn't seem to require sensible answers, and didn't just read out a page number in the O-level textbook and leave the class to get on with it. Chemistry was the one and only subject that the girl actually wanted to understand, to study. Not for any stupid exam, but because of the fact that two substances could change into something else entirely when you put them together, fascinated her. Everything in the whole universe, she discovered, was made up of tiny, tiny particles. Atoms and molecules. Just little dots. When you broke everything down to its basic components, there was really not much there except space. That made her feel safe, somehow. Like looking up at the stars. At least, those nights when you could actually see them through the grime and dirty cloud cover of a West London sky. It somehow made her feel small and insignificant. And that was a good thing. By comparison, the problems and anxieties, which she never admitted to anyone, not even to herself half the time, that occasionally reared up and ambushed her in the night, seemed unimportant. She had fallen in love with the periodic table the moment she turned a page and saw the different coloured boxes, all ordered in groups, with their numbers, symbols and weights. She would pore over it, rolling the more difficult names around in her mouth, not knowing if she was pronouncing them right. She knew how to say palladium, though. That was easy. It was the name of a famous theatre in the West End. When she was little, her nan had stopped smoking for weeks and saved up for 2 tickets to see Aladdin at the Palladium, starring Nan's favourite bloke off the telly, Danny LaRue. They'd both shouted themselves hoarse. "He's behind you!" and went home down Oxford Street on the bus in the dark, the Christmas lights twinkling overhead, and the shop windows full of stuff she could only ever dream of having in her stocking. Then there were all the obvious elements, of course. Gold, silver, mercury, lead. But what about zirconium, which sounded more like a science fiction villain? The Mysterons in Captain Scarlet, maybe. Or thorium. That one made her think of Norse myths. She particularly liked the sound of the planet ones. Neptunium and plutonium. She'd cut the periodic table out of her textbook and stuck it to some card with cow gum. As she covered it with sticky-backed plastic, she ran her thumb over the surface to smooth out the air bubbles, thinking about how pleased Blue Peter presenter Janet Ellis would be with her efforts. She placed it proudly on her desk, and her new science teacher spotted it during the very first lesson.